From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 533. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in our forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, good to be on here with you for another show all about basketball gaming and real basketball. As always, I'll throw it over to you to ask, what are we talking about this week?
Well, first we will pay tribute to Jerry West, who recently passed away, followed by getting to our main topic, which was also a community question. Name 5 players from the past who you think would be even better today. So we're going to kick this off talking about Jerry West. So Andrew, he was an all-star for every year of his career, all 14 seasons, Hall of Famer, a 69-70 scoring champ, 1972 NBA champ, 71-72 assist champ, Andrew. So kind of like Nate Archibald, you got the best of both worlds, the scoring and the dishing. And in that season in 71-72, where he was the assist champ, he also averaged 25.8 points per game, 12-time All-NBA, 5-time All-Defensive Team, 68-69 Finals MVP, 71-72 All-Star MVP, and obviously named to the NBA 75th anniversary team. But he wasn't just a scorer and a great passer either, Andrew. He also averaged 5.8 rebounds per game at the guard position for his career. Lights out free throw shooter, 81.4% for his career, and 47.4% from the field. So an efficient shooter as well, an efficient scorer. And this is one of my favorite stats for Jerry West. He had one season where steals and blocks were counted, and that was in 73-74 when they first started counting them in the NBA. And in that season, at age 35, he averaged 2.6 steals per game. He had 81 steals in 31 games, Andrew. My guess is he would be in contention for, an all-time steals per game leader if he had them counted for his entire career. And, God only knows what his total steal tally would have been if they were kept through his entire career. So I pulled up his college stats, and something really stood out to me. His senior year of college, he played 31 games. He played for West Virginia. This was in 59-60. He averaged 16.5 rebounds per game and shot over 50% from the field, 4.3 assists, and 29.3 points. So obviously an outstanding college player as well. And he has a number of awards and accolades from college. And he was listed at 6'3". Could have been a little bit taller, but that's around the same height as Steph Curry. And before I throw it over to you, I want to point something out about his scoring. So he had a higher single season scoring average than Larry Bird, Dominique Wilkins, Vince Carter, Allen Iverson's MVP season, Alex English, who led the 80s in total points, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and Shaq. And he also had a higher career scoring average than all of those people that I just named. So, ridiculous scorer.
Oh, absolutely. The first player to average over 40 points per game in a single playoff run. MJ is the only other player to do that to that point, and has the record of 46.3 points per game in a single series against Baltimore. That's ahead of MJ's 43.7 against the Celtics in '86. So he could definitely get buckets. And to your point, in the playoffs, I think only Michael Jordan, Luka Doncic, and Kevin Durant have higher scoring averages in the playoffs. He was Mr. Clutch. That was his nickname, obviously. He was a great clutch player, one of the original clutch scorers, and making those game-winning shots, that infamous 60-foot shot against the Knicks in 1970. And yes, to your point, led the league in scoring and assists, one of only 8 players to do so. Oscar Robertson, Tony Archibald, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, LeBron James, Wilt Chamberlain, Trae Young, and Jerry West. Trae Young and Nate Archibald are the only 2 to do it in the same season, but certainly a very short list of players who have both been big distributors at one point and also great scorers as well. And the only finals MVP from the runner-up, that was how impressive his performance was. Interestingly, didn't set the precedent, but yeah, a tremendous player. Also a successful coach and GM. with the Lakers as well. 4 championships under his watch as the GM. He had a record of 145 and 101 as the coach of the Lakers, replaced Bill Sharman as the coach and then as the GM. So, like Larry Bird, success in all 3 facets of the NBA. Very impressive.
And it could also be argued that he has the greatest pull-up jump shot of all time. I don't care what era you're talking about. If you go back and watch the footage, he could pull up from anywhere on a dime in people's faces. He was great at creating separation with his dribble as well in order to, get his shot off. Even back then when you had to keep your hand on top of the ball, which made dribbling look so much more primitive, all of his crossovers look different than what we have for crossovers today because players are allowed to put their hands on the side and under the ball, etc. You couldn't get away with that back then. So given the rules back then, the way the game was officiated in general, and what he had to deal with in that regard, I think it makes his scoring output and what he was able to do on the floor that much more impressive. And if you want to talk about a player that I think would be even better today, being allowed to dribble the way the players do today, the defense being handicapped, etc. I think Jerry West might be even better today than he was back when he played in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s.
I mean, give him a 3-point line and see what he can do. To that point, he was, of course, celebrated with NBA's greatest in NBA 2K12, and when I was actually playing through his game for the first time to unlock those teams to complete that challenge, I found myself down late in the game by 3, hit a clutch shot with him, appropriately enough, but it would have been from 3-point range. If I'd had that 3-point line, would have forced overtime. Unfortunately, it was only counted for 2, as his 60-foot shot did. That would have won the game as well in 1970 against the Knicks, that 60-foot Hail Mary. So, yeah, imagine him with a 3-point line.
Yeah, same with Pete Maravich, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of players back then, Sam Jones and whatnot, players who could just flat out score the ball. What would their averages have been if there was a 3-point line, right? It's too bad the NBA didn't adopt the 3-point line earlier, kind of like the ABA did, because the ABA had it for about a decade probably before the NBA even adopted that line. So there's a lot of what ifs there. I also found it interesting with Jerry West that he struggled a lot with depression. I guess he had a tough relationship with his father. And there's a story in his book that talks about how, he finally got the courage when he got older to stand up to his father. And I think that he was an unbelievably tough person and tough player because of that tough upbringing and whatnot. But I want to get my hand on that book. I've only seen parts of it, but I think it's called like West to West or West for West. And it's a story about, yeah, exactly. And it's a story about not only his, amazing NBA career, his college career, like you stated, his career in management and whatnot, but also that tough upbringing and whatnot.
No, and for men of that generation, often didn't talk about those matters. So for him to open up like that is certainly inspirational, and seems like quite a man. Had many friendships in the NBA with younger players as well as his own peers. He was very much respected by those young players, and players have talked about how he would, as a manager, be generous with his time and offer advice, mentorship, etc. So a great character, and always a great mind for the game when you heard him speak about it. So a tremendous loss. He was the logo, obviously, the inspiration for the logo, and one of the all-time greats. And we've lost a few greats recently, Derek, and if the universe could just hold off on us losing any more for at least a few months, that'd be really nice. Obviously, as we've said before, a lot of these guys are getting on in age. Bill Walton, Chet Walker, and Jerry West all in quick succession. As I've said before, Derek, let's appreciate these guys and give them their flowers while they're alive.
Absolutely. I also want to point out that there was a nice highlight submitted by Chuck LA92 for the NLSC Top 10 Plays of the Week, where he's playing NBA 2K16 and he's using Jerry West. There's a nice little tribute where he kind of rocks his defender falls backwards. He does a spin move and then he goes in for a sweet looking layup. Had to make that the number one play, right? And, in honor of Jerry West. But yeah, Jerry West has also been historically fun to use in video games. I actually think he's one of the players that the creators of NBA 2K made pretty darn effective in their games. They made him have a good handle. His shot wasn't, his shot form wasn't exactly accurate, but it was easy to shoot, so you could knock down a lot of threes because the 3-point lines in the game, they don't remove it for the classic teams. And you can hit, a lot of pull-up jumpers with him, and you can attack the basket like Chuck LA did. And NBA Live obviously has a history with including Jerry West in their games as well, in the Legends pool on the all-decade teams and whatnot. And obviously he was effective there as well.
Yeah, he came along in NBA Live 2000, and we've talked about the tremendous faces of Live 2000 before, obviously, but to get a lot of those Legends faces right, they were working from black and white photos at the time. Very impressive faces, including Jerry West in that game.
Yeah, I'm always floored with the quality of some of the games that came out a couple decades ago or more.
Yeah.
Because
NBA Ballers?
They were NBA Ballers is ridiculous. Like, those faces, I know they're not fully animated. They're animated enough though, where they still look human and everything. But the faces for NBA Ballers like Jermaine O'Neal and Ben Wallace and Stephon Marbury, Vince Carter, it looks exactly like them. Like, you can't beat it, right? So yeah, NBA Ballers is a great example of, the amazing things they could do with limited tech back then.
So, rest in peace, Jerry West. Thank you for everything you did for the game of basketball. Again, a real shame to see these legends passing away, some of them a little bit sooner due to illness. But to that point, Derek, we touched on it a bit there, that players like Jerry West could be so much better with a three-point line, and some of the changes to the game over the years, including some of the, shall we say, lax defensive rules in more recent years.
Yeah, so that's our main topic. Name 5 players from the past who you think would be better today. So I have a bunch of oddball choices for this one because I didn't want to choose any common names and just kind of mix it up and have fun with it. But why don't you get us started on this one?
Well, I also have 5 superstars, Hall of Famers, legends, if you will. Also have 5 more perhaps unorthodox choices or lesser-known names that may not spring to mind for everybody, and also 2 sidebar examples, which I will get to in between those two. But I'm actually going to tip things off with an example that some people probably wouldn't think, because people think of the three-point shooting now and think how that would really benefit players. But I'm actually going to say Shaquille O'Neal. And people will say, oh, well, he's not going to be able to adapt to the modern game. He doesn't have that shooting touch. He doesn't have the range, the free throw shooting, etc. But if you look at the lack of defensive rules, Derek, or the lax defensive rules, I should say, the lack of big bodies and physicality in the modern game, who is going to stop Shaq? He is going to be Wilt Chamberlain in the modern game. The ranged shooting is irrelevant. If you get somebody in the game like Shaq these days dominating inside, the game is going to have to change because of him.
I 100% agree. I think that a lot of big men that dominated back then, or even role player big men, people like Otis Thorpe, at the power forward position, people like even Benoit Benjamin at the center position, players that were big and mobile and strong and could move people, they would just absolutely feast in today's NBA. I feel like the defensive 3-second rule combined with the restricted area make it so players most of the time have to stay out of the paint on defense. That means a lot of single coverage, right? For guys like Shaq, for these dominant bigs from the past and even role-playing bigs. And I think that a lot of the bigs from the 70s, 80s, 90s, et cetera, and even the early 2000s would be that much better today, because defense has to be mostly hands off. The paint is usually more open. These guys could really run the floor and they'd be able to get out on the break. Yeah, I 100% agree.
And again, if you bring back that dominant post scoring, that physicality in the paint, like I said, you have to change the game. You would have to get other centers, other big men that can guard that and also counteract that at the other end. So much like three-point shooting, Steph Curry's shooting and other strong three-point shooters today have changed the game in that way. You know, people call it evolution, certainly change, whatever you want to call it. Then it's going to change when a player that dominant comes along, as it did for Wilt, as it did for MJ, as it did for Steph Curry.
Yeah. I also want to point out, you remember the highlight where Shaq is throwing it down and there's about 4 or 5 New Jersey Nets around him.
Oh, yeah.
And a couple like hanging or off of him. Now picture that same scenario, but all, 4 or 5 Nets can't be in the paint with him, right? It's going to be, if he's against the Celtics, maybe it's like, I don't know, Al Horford maybe trying to come over at the last minute to help, and maybe Derek White on his back, right? So like I just don't see a scenario where Shaq would be playing in today's NBA and not put up even bigger numbers and be even more effective.
Well, we have some players shooting 70% from the field, Mitch Robinson and whatnot, so I don't see why Shaq can't dominate. People think that the game has changed more than it has, and if you bring Shaq into the modern game, he's just going to destroy other bigs.
Agreed. So I also did similar. I chose 5 All-Stars or better from the past that I think would be even better today. And I chose 5 role players, so all non-All-Stars. So I'll get to my first All-Star. So Ralph Sampson, 7'4", so same height as Wembanyama, and in my opinion, a better athlete than Wembanyama. He was a freak of nature who I just don't think could be stopped today. I've shown a bunch of highlights of Ralph Sampson from when he was with the Houston Rockets, from when he was, from the All-Star games, even like his first season with like Golden State, after the Rockets had moved on from him. And he would catch alley-oops where his elbows were at the rim. He also could stretch the floor. Sure, he wasn't shooting threes. He might be today, but he could stretch the floor and hit the 15 to 18 footers as well. He was just an absolute gazelle getting up and down the floor. He didn't really have one golden season. His first 3 years in the NBA, which is 83, 84, 84, 85, and 85, 86, he was pretty consistent across the board. All 3 of those years, he averaged over 10 rebounds a game, was a really good shot blocker, over 2 blocks a game in 2 of those seasons, over 1 steal a game in 2 of those seasons, and over 20 points a game in 2 of those seasons as well, and over 50% from the floor in 2 of the seasons. So I personally think that Ralph Sampson, with that length, with that athleticism, which, like I said, in my opinion, is better than Wembanyama, with that strength, with that skill set, I think that Ralph Sampson would just be unbelievably unstoppable today.
That combination of size, athleticism, and skill, a very skilled player, I would say more skilled than Wembanyama as well. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he could be very dominant today. Of course, with Sampson, you remember that miraculous game-winning shot on that lob against the Lakers back in 1986 to go through to the finals, where they put up a pretty good fight against Larry Bird's Celtics, as you well know. And that was very early on in his career, so he came into the league and, as you say, didn't really have that one standout season as some other greats did, but a tremendous player, and playing alongside Hakeem Olajuwon, that is great versatility to have those 2 big men in there. And again, people talk about that versatility and skill sets and everything, but we have seen players complement each other and be able to work together like that in the past and have unorthodox lineups. So this stuff isn't new, and there are obviously changes that space the floor these days where a tall player with shooting touch could really dominate. So no, I see where you're coming from, absolutely, and agree.
I'm just picturing Ralph Sampson getting up and down the floor in today's NBA and trying to figure out who's going to stop him. Right. I'm just trying. I've shown footage of this. Go on my @D4384 channel and type in like @D4384 Ralph Sampson, and you'll see those videos. What a freak of nature athlete. Yeah. People act like, big men weren't great athletes back then, but look no further than Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, who were Olympic athletes, right? They were Olympic level athletes. And then you got people like Ralph Sampson and Hakeem Olajuwon, who was an amazing athlete himself. David Robinson, completely chiseled, jacked David Robinson, who could jump and run the floor with the best of them. There's so many examples.
Even young Shaq.
Daryl Dawkins, Shaq. Go watch Orlando Shaq. right? Alonzo Mourning was one hell of an athlete. But you can look Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Andrew. Look at those high school and college highlights and look at, young Kareem and early 80s Kareem with the Bucks and the Lakers. Just an absolute freak athlete. Big men have been great athletes for decades. Guys, like I already mentioned, like Otis Thorpe, he was chiseled, jacked. He could get up the floor with anybody, and he could move you, and he could also rise up over you. There's so many instances that I've seen because I was looking for a signature shot. So many instances where Otis Thorpe would grab the board, and he would go absolutely coast to coast, whether he was with the Kings or he was with the Rockets, and he would throw it down, and he would take off from a couple feet inside the free throw line. Like, kids, watch the footage and stop being biased, because be realistic.
Absolutely. So, as a blanket statement, Derek, I would say any of the great scorers from the past, with the lax defensive rules we have now, would absolutely flourish. So, you could name all kinds of great scorers, big and small. I am going to make a very predictable choice. I am going to say Michael Jordan. I feel I can't leave him off the list, Derek, because you're talking about less physicality. You're talking about a player who could put up huge numbers against very physical defense in a league that had a slower pace going into the 90s. He could still get his points. And you're talking about rules these days that are very generous with free throws. Michael Jordan could get his share of calls. I'll absolutely admit it back in the day, Derek. He absolutely got his share of calls. He would definitely get them today. His skill, his athleticism, his desire to score the basketball, I don't think anybody, no matter what anyone says, nobody is shutting down MJ today.
Yeah, imagine you can't touch MJ, or you have to be careful about the contact you make with MJ. Just absolutely ridiculous. And I made a point, too, on X. First off, Michael Jordan could shoot 0 threes in today's NBA and still average 30, right? Like 30 or 40 points, because who is stopping the athletic freak Michael Jordan today? Who is stopping a player with his skill set?
He would just
absolutely, like you're telling me you can't touch Michael Jordan, just ridiculous. But I want to make a point about 3-point shooting. When he took a higher volume of threes, when he wasn't just taking them at the end of a shot clock or in a desperation situation, etc., and especially in the playoffs, he shot them incredibly well. And I want to give an example, and this is all before the line moved in. This is his first 3 titles. 1991 playoffs, he shot 38.5% from 3. 1992 playoffs, 38.6% from 3. And 1993 playoffs, 38.9% from 3. Total 55 for 142, 38.7% from 3 on the line that's used today, the 3-point line that's used today. He shot 10 for 25 from 3 in the 93 finals, which is 40%. The league average 3-point percentage in the NBA, and when I made this post, it was 18-19. The league average 3-point percentage in the NBA in 18-19 was 34%, so he was way above today's league average. And I think it's still above what was in 23-24 by a few percentage points. So like I said, he could shoot threes, and when he shot a higher volume, he shot them well. He just didn't need to or feel the need to in order to dominate, because he was trying to be as efficient as possible. So I also want to make another point. Those percentages compared to LeBron James, who people try to give LeBron James an advantage from the 3-point line, saying that, the biggest thing, and you've seen this on social media, is Jordan couldn't shoot threes, right?
Yes,
so he wouldn't be as good today. So you heard what Jordan's 3-point shooting was in his first 3 title runs. This is LeBron James' 3 title runs. So he hadn't won his 4th yet. This was his first 3. Playoffs, 11-12, 25.9%. 2013, 37.5%. 2016, 34%. 90 of 275, 32.7%. So Jordan, in his first 3 title runs in the playoffs, shot 38.7% combined, and LeBron shot 32.7% in his. So just miss me with the BS, okay? If Jordan played today and he was asked to shoot more threes and he shot them at a higher volume, trust me when I say that Jordan would have been a really, really good 3-point shooter. I just don't see any way he wouldn't have been.
I mean, we're talking about one of the most competitive individuals who was dedicated to getting better and better, even after he was the best player in the league and dominating the league already. So the idea that he wouldn't be able to hone his three-point shooting is absurd. And yes, those numbers don't come up very often, do they? People often cherry-pick some other numbers from his final years where he wasn't shooting a lot of threes with the Wizards, or his early years with the Bulls when nobody was shooting a whole lot of threes in the NBA in the 80s. I think there was a year there where the Lakers took 10 all year. So it was a league-wide thing. The three-point shot was kind of that ultimate weapon that you'd pull out when you really needed to get an extra point. It wasn't what you were looking for on every single play. But those numbers, as you said, before the line came in for a couple of years there, those percentages, people just don't bring it up. They bring up the shorter line. They bring up the seasons where he wasn't a prolific three-point shooter, but they don't bring up those ones. Funny that. Those cherry-picked stats, Derek.
Yeah. That's why we try to keep it real here at the NLSC, right? My next choice, Andrew, is Jack Sikma. So center for most of his career, played power forward a couple times, listed at 6'11", 230. Only really started shooting threes in his last 3 seasons, where he shot 38% on 2.7 attempts per game, 34.2% on 2.8 attempts per game, and 34.1% on 1.8 attempts per game. An average on all 3 seasons would be probably the league average 3-point percentage. Today, he peaked at 19.6 points per game and 12.7 rebounds per game, but also had impressive assists, steals, and block numbers. He also was lights out from the free throw line for his career. He shot 84.9% from the free throw line, but around 46% from the field. 7-time All-Star, NBA champ, and is in the Hall of Fame. He's what I like to call a slingshot shooter. Andrew, he had a very awkward over-the-head shot, almost like a catapult. And it was very, very tough to block. Go watch the footage. He also had like this weird hitch in his shot, so it was hard to time how to block it. But he could shoot incredibly fast, and he could get his shot off whenever he wanted. I don't see a player like Jack Sikma with his skill set, with his ability to stretch the floor, with his ability to shoot over anybody, to, the ability to find cutters because he was a great passer. Like, I just don't see Jack Sikma not being better in today's NBA.
Any bigs from the past that have that diverse skill set, that they had that shooting touch, that if they were allowed to step out of what was then the traditional big role, what was expected of them, how basketball was played, to take more threes, to handle the ball a little bit more, to obviously get into the lane now with less physicality and shot blocking and so forth, I think would really benefit from those changes in the modern game. So yeah, I think Sikma is one of those examples that doesn't come to mind for a lot of people. It certainly didn't come to mind for me. I'll put my hand up and admit that. But no, that's a great example.
Also, an important point. Like Brook Lopez, he didn't start shooting threes until later in his career when his coach asked him to. And what happened when he started shooting threes, Andrew? He shot a very, very good percentage.
Players can develop, yeah.
Just like Mario Elie talked about Hakeem Olajuwon. He said Hakeem Olajuwon would routinely, effortlessly knock down threes in practice, and Robert Horry echoed those comments. It's just because that wasn't where he was going to be the most efficient, and he wasn't asked to shoot more threes. Same with a guy like Patrick Ewing. You're telling me with that beautiful shot, with him always being able to stretch the floor up to 20 to 22 feet, you're telling me that he couldn't step a couple feet further back and be a effective three-point shooter? So Jack Sikma is a great example of a guy who throughout almost his entire career was not shooting threes. And then, boom, he was asked, and bam, there he goes, shooting a good percentage. So that's another important point.
And again, like a Brook Lopez, you can make those changes through your career. You can work on your shot. We've seen a lot of players do that over the years, develop that range, either three-point range or that mid-range jump shot. So this idea that players would be locked into the abilities they had, or that they couldn't, just because it came along later in their career, that they couldn't adapt to it today is again, absurd.
Exactly. So who do you got next?
Well, this is a name that you brought up at the top of the show, Pete Maravich. Imagine an open floor to accommodate his underrated range, increasingly lenient ball handling rules to allow him to use his talents that he honed by dribbling a tennis ball. Pete Maravich did have a short career, but certainly a Hall of Fame one. Imagine what he could do in the modern game.
Yeah, so I think it was Bill Walton who stated that they calculated what he would have averaged in college if he had had a 3-point line. Like they watched the footage, where he was shooting from, et cetera. And it was determined that he would have averaged over 50 points per game, Andrew, if he had had a 3-point line. As it is, without a 3-point line, he averaged 44
the
points
record, yeah,
per game. But I talked about Jerry West earlier about, in contention for the greatest pull-up shooter of all time. Pete Maravich is right there with him. And he would just pull up on a dime from anywhere. And he's just one of the most skilled offensive players of all time. I completely agree. I think he would be even better today.
And I think he'd be one of the most spectacular players as well, not just in his numbers and success and dominating on the floor, but look at those highlights that he was pulling off in the 70s. As much street ball as you could bring into the NBA at the time, he was doing that. And as I said, the more lenient ball handling rules now would absolutely allow for some killer crossovers and crazy moves.
He would be going viral daily on social media for what he would be able to put together on the basketball court. So next for me, Andrew, is Reggie Theus, another choice you probably didn't think of, but I have some reasons for this. So 6'6" point guard, great size. He used to be listed at 6'7". It looks like he got knocked down to 6'6". He played from 1978 to 1991. He made 2 All-Star teams and peaked at 23.8 points per game at age 25 in the 82-83 season. Awesome combo guard who would be an even better scorer today, in my opinion. I can't imagine how good Theus would be in today's open court. He used to fly up and down the court. He averaged 6.3 assists per game for his career, but peaked, Andrew, at 9.6 assists per game in 85-86. No matter where he went, Chicago, Sacramento, Atlanta, Orlando, New Jersey, he always filled up the stat sheet, specifically, though, in the scoring column. His final season in the NBA at age 33 with the Nets, he shot 1.8 threes per game and shot 36.1% from three. That is roughly around the league average today. So Theus could stretch the floor. He had amazing size at that point guard position, which would be considered amazing size today. Knockdown, mid-range shooter, was absolutely brilliant when he got to the rim. I just think that Reggie Theus would thrive in today's NBA.
One of those names that really flies under the radar, and yes, I didn't think of it myself. You do forget how good he was when he had that bigger role in the NBA, out of the league kind of early, as you said, at age 33. The star for the Bulls before MJ got there, obviously, and getting rid of him helped them kind of tank and get that third pick to get MJ, actually. And yes, that is obviously an upgrade. That's the understatement of the century. But yeah, a really forgotten player from the 80s.
Right. Think about all the small guards in today's NBA.
Sure.
The point guards at like 6'1", 6'2". I made a list of them. There's a lot. Reggie Theus would be probably a mismatch nightmare. And I just picture him getting out on the break, having runners left and right, and being able to make a decision of, I'm going to attack the basket, and more than likely, if he did, he would score, or pull up and knock down a mid-range shot, or, make a sweet dish to one of his teammates who could attack the basket, or, find an open shooter for free. I just feel like he had all the tools to be a dominant player in today's NBA. So who do you got next?
Well, I know you like this one. Well, I'm pretty confident anyway, but Larry Bird. A focus on creating open looks for three, the green light to shoot more of them. Just imagine his scoring average. He averaged 20 and 10 for his career. I think he would obviously average double digits in rebounds. I think he would average double digits in assists as well. I think he could average a triple-double with the way the game is played today.
Easily. And I was... Every time somebody says something along the lines of Larry Bird wouldn't be as good today, I look back to the 91-92 game versus the Trailblazers where he scored 49 points and the Celtics won in overtime. And they were switching a bunch of defenders on him in this game. It was Cliff Robinson, who's about 6'10" with all the length, and he was super athletic back then. Buck Williams, who was incredibly strong, had height and length as well, and was a great athlete. And Clyde Drexler as well. And all of them were switching off on Larry Bird in this game. And all he kept doing is just outsmarting them, and he would just turn over his right or left shoulder and just fire up high arcing shots on them, and they would splash through the net. And he just made all of them look stupid. So even if your argument was, well, today's NBA is more athletic, which, by the way, you and I have talked about this, I don't agree. I can point to a broken back Larry absolutely dismantling athletes who would be unbelievable in today's NBA. So miss me with that. Like, Larry would absolutely not only outsmart players today like he did back then, but he would also outmaneuver them on the court. And I also think that whether you're dealing with young, more spry Larry, non-injured back Larry, or you're dealing with an older injured back Larry, he'll give you a triple-double or could give you a triple-double on any night. So I completely agree.
You're talking about a player who would routinely tell his opponents where he was going to shoot from and shoot it in their face and make it. So if you're talking about a game that is very dedicated to creating open looks from the three-point line, then it's just, you leave Larry Bird open like that is just going to be deadly. He's just going to absolutely kill you from three-point range. And people obviously bring up the athleticism. No, he wasn't one of the best athletes at the time. He wouldn't be one of the best athletes today. But to that I say, Jokic and Doncic. The skill, these are still above average athletes compared to the general population. We've talked about this before, Derek. And you bring skill into it, as they have today, as he had back then. Skill will still, when you are still an above average athlete, you don't need to be the best athlete in the NBA if you are that skilled to make your mark. We've seen that time and time again. We're seeing it today.
Also, watch young Larry and mid-'80s Larry get up and down the floor. He was a good athlete.
He's a pro athlete, yeah.
Yeah, he was a good athlete. And I also want to point something out. You mentioned three-point shooting. So I've said it before. Charles Barkley attempted more threes in his career than Larry Bird. But Larry only attempted 1.9 threes per game for his career and shot 37.6%, which, again, is an excellent percentage. And he had many years over 40%. In fact, 5 seasons over 40% from the three-point line. Are you telling me that Larry Bird in today's NBA, if you gave him an extra 4 or 5 threes a game where there's landing space fouls and stuff, so he doesn't even have to worry about somebody doing a hard contest on him, you're telling me that his scoring average wouldn't increase and that his three-point percentage wouldn't even go up more? Like, I think that Larry Bird would average even more. He averaged 29.9 at his peak. I would say in today's NBA, he's easily beating that.
Absolutely. So who's up next for you?
Joe Dumars. So Joe Dumars, 6'3", same height as Steph Curry. Great combo guard. People act like combo guards are new, but he could play the point and he could play the shooting guard. Obviously had a great career, Hall of Fame, 6-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champ, 3-time All-NBA, 85-86 All-Rookie, 5-time All-Defensive, 88-89 Finals MVP, etc. But he peaked at 23.5 points per game in 92-93. His career went from 1985 to 1999. He shot 38.2% from three on 2.5 attempts per game for his career. Nobody brings that up, Andrew. Nobody talks about Joe Dumars being a great three-point shooter. But he was an excellent three-point shooter. That is well above league average for today. And he also had 7 seasons over 40% from three. Hard-nosed defender, good passer, smart shot maker, and killed it from the line for his career at 84.3%. Andrew, I watched Joe Dumars, and I said it on last week's show. When I watched Joe Dumars, he's very similar with his skills as a ball handler, guys like Allen Iverson and Steve Francis. People don't realize it. Go back and watch Joe Dumars tape from the late 80s, early and mid 90s. That ball was on a string, and he would cross people over. He would go behind the back on him. He would step back, etc. I am so impressed with Joe Dumars as a basketball player, and I think that he would absolutely kill in this NBA where they don't allow as much contact. I think his skills translate beautifully, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was a 30-point scorer in today's NBA.
Oh, offensively, he would absolutely dominate. Defensively, with some of the rule changes, might limit some of his ability to really clamp down on offensive players because everyone's affected by that. But at the same time, he was such a smart player, and not a dirty player. I mean, he was on the Bad Boys Pistons, but he was certainly one of the classiest players on that squad, that he still would be a tremendous defender today, even with those lax rules.
Well, that's because he could move his feet, right?
Yes.
He was great at moving his feet, and he had great hands. He played good defense, even if he wasn't making contact with the offensive player. So anybody that was like that, like Alvin Robertson's another guy like that, if you'll go back and watch the footage. Great feet, great balance, great hands. Like, he would be an elite defender in today's NBA, even if he could never touch the offensive player. So who's your last one for the star picks?
So this is a name that has come up already, and also one that the community mentioned a lot as well, but Charles Barkley. Again, that versatility at the power forward spot. I think he'd be encouraged to take advantage of that and handle the ball even more, further develop his outside shot. As you noted, basically as prolific as Larry Bird when it was all said and done, as three-point shooters to become more prolific in the 90s, obviously. But I think he would develop that shot even more. He could hit it back in the day, not at a eye-popping percentage, but certainly at a level that kept the defense honest. There's less big, strong bodies to deal with, less physicality, as we've said before. He already played bigger than his size anyway. I think Chuck would just be tremendous in the modern NBA.
Nobody today is stopping Sixers Chuck. And another thing that I want to point out about him was he was an outstanding shot blocker for his size early in his career. You can see highlights of him just meeting people at the rim and stuffing it right back into their face. Now remember, he's listed at 6'6", but a lot of players said he was about 6'4". But he had 125 blocks in 80 games in 85, 86, and he had 104 and 103 the next two seasons. And when he had 104, he only played 68 games. He also had 173 steals in the 85-86 season, which would be in tops of the league over the last few years in today's NBA. All the while getting 1,026 rebounds in that same season, Andrew. 1,026 at that height. He also shot 57.2% from the field that season. The next season, 59.4, then 58.7, then 57.9, and then 60%, Andrew. And I want to point something out about stretching the floor. When he started shooting more mid-range shots, when he started shooting the 13 to 20 footers, he started getting really good at it. Go and watch the highlights from when he scored 50 against Chris Webber and the Warriors. And I think it was like 93, 94. And the majority of his points in that game come from face-up jumpers and whatnot. So Barkley could absolutely shoot. Did he shoot too many threes at times? Yes. Did he not shoot a great percentage from downtown most of the time? Yes. But he could definitely still stretch the floor. But nobody is competing today with that athletic Sixers Barkley from the 80s.
And a smarter player than he's often given credit for, and a better defender. There's kind of that narrative, and we've talked about narratives before, that Barkley was an average defender or a poor defender, but you just cited statistics that show that he was very dedicated on defense and very effective defensively as well. So, who's your fifth superstar?
So I got Jeff Ruland, the Jokic of the 80s. So he started his career in 1981. He's listed at 6'10", 240. The reason why I know that people are calling him the Jokic of the 80s is there's a very popular YouTube video that's showcasing Jeff Ruland and showcasing his skill set being very similar to Jokic. So go watch the tape. He is a one-man fast break, incredible passer, stretch the floor in the mid-range, crafty around the hoop, and a better defender than Jokic. He peaked at 22.2 points per game, 12.3 rebounds per game, 3.9 assists per game, 0.9 steals per game, and 1.0 blocks per game. And he also shot 57.9% from the floor in 83-84 and played 41.1 minutes per game, which led the league that season. Go and watch that footage. He would grab the ball off the board, dribble the length of the court, and either dish it off or finish. He could stretch the floor in the mid-range, but he had all those nifty tricks that you see Jokic have around the rim, little flip hook shots, little quick fadeaways. He was great at using his body. You got to be great at using your body if you're averaging 12.3 rebounds a game, Andrew. But I think that, watching what Jokic is easily able to do in today's NBA, I don't see why Ruland wouldn't have his numbers go up even more today.
It's another deep cut there. I love it. I would also recommend that you check out Adam Ryan's NLSC Podcast. Actually has a spin-off show where he talks to Jeff Ruland and Rick Mahorn. Very entertaining stories from their Bullets days together.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And Adam's a great guy. I've talked to him many times on X, formerly known as Twitter. I do have two honorable mentions really quick, Andrew. So Danny Ainge, who was a one-time All-Star, 6'5" point guard, shooting guard, mostly shooting guard, but he has good size. Career from 81 to 95, peaked at 17.9 points per game in his only full season with the Kings, 37.8% from three for his career on 2.5 attempts per game. Give Danny Ainge the green light today, and he is a better player and I think a better athlete overall than a guys like Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero and whatnot. And as you know, Danny Ainge was a multi-sport athlete. So he was a great athlete. But I think Ainge would average even more today. And then Tom Gugliotta, who I've shown highlights recently on X, he peaked at about 20.6 points per game, close to 10 rebounds a game, put up 2.2 steals per game, actually, Andrew, as well, and could block shots. He was efficient from the floor a few seasons, shot over 50%, etc. Tom Gugliotta, I showed a couple dunks of him from the 90s where he looked like Blake Griffin out there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you were probably even surprised where he was rising up and like throwing the ball in the hoop like Blake Griffin did on Pau Gasol. He was a super athlete and he could stretch the floor and he had all the moves back to the basket. He could turn and fade on you. He could go up and under on you. He just had the full package. And I think that Tom Gugliotta would be even better today.
No, that's a great call for both of them. Absolutely agree. As a power forward back in the 90s, Googs is a great example of versatility the big men did have. And it's not just a recent innovation. It goes back beyond him as well, back into the, right back into the 70s and the 60s even, with players like Bill Russell. Obviously, there was that versatility among big men even before today.
And Dave Cowens, right?
Of course.
Dave Cowens, Bob McAdoo. Right, you can go back to the 70s and you can find a bunch of these guys that were super versatile and had that size, like Gugliotta.
So my two kind of honourable mentions and a bit of a sidebar here because my reasoning is slightly different. Grant Hill and Penny Hardaway. Now, obviously, their all-around play, their versatility, their ability to shoot. Grant Hill did become a competent three-point shooter later in his career. Once again, that ability to develop that three-point shot. Penny could knock down threes as well. I think they would absolutely be great players today, even better. But I mention them specifically, Derek, because there have been some medical advances that might have allowed them to stay healthier than they were, particularly Penny having that microfracture surgery that has been that has been discontinued. And you know all about knee surgeries, obviously, Derek. If they'd avoided some of those surgeries, had better procedures, just imagine what they could do today.
Penny said that he was never able to overcome the atrophy on his bad leg due to the surgery, that it never got to be as strong.
Never felt right,
as his good leg. And there was a story, he was telling a story about how after games when he was with the Suns, he wouldn't be able to get in or out of his car. Like, that's how stiff he was. That's how bad it was. So it's surprising that he did as well as he did in those Suns years, to be completely honest. So I totally agree.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So let's get to the role players from the past that we think would be better today. And I'll kick us off. John Sunvold, career 1983 to 1992. I'm going to direct you to videos for each one of these people. Go type in YouTube, John Sunvold, the Miami Heat's first sharpshooter. And it's a Ryan Van Dusen video, and he's awesome, right? That channel is amazing. You can find so many great classic Hoops clips.
That's a must subscribe, that channel.
Yeah, exactly. So Quickly on Sundvold, career three-point percentage of 39.2% on 1.1 attempts per game. In 88-89, he attempted 1.2 per game and shot 52.2% from three. Knockdown free throw shooter, career free throw percentage of 84.9%. Per 36-minute averages, which I think is relevant here because he never really played that many minutes. But per 36, he averaged 8.2 assists per game in 85-86 with a career average of 6 assists per game per 36. He could dish the rock. Also averaged about a steal per game per 36. Absolutely beautiful three-point shot, Andrew. Go watch that video. Peaked at 11.2 points per game in 86-87, but per 36 had an average of 15.9, listed at 6'2", so the same height as Kyrie Irving. That makes him 2 inches taller than Fred VanVleet, so size would not be an issue in today's NBA. He was also able to be physical back then. So John Sundvold, kind of an oddball pick, but I think he would get more minutes today, average more points, and he would put up more threes.
Oh, absolutely, and that's another great deep cut there. I think you're going to have me and a lot of the community beat on some of these picks, Derek. But yeah, what a great shot there.
So who do you got?
Well, this is a far more predictable pick, but Mohamed Abdul-Rauf. His game is very well suited to the modern NBA. Obviously, great shooting touch, the way he'd get his shot off so quick, a fast player, underrated athleticism. People forget he was a dunk contest participant. You can go to YouTube and look at some of his college dunks as well, just getting up and throwing it down. What a great combo guard back in the day. Was kind of forced out of the league, and you can go and read about that and the situation that happened with Abdul-Rauf. But obviously, Phil Jackson made that comparison to Steph Curry. People immediately shot it down because they compared numbers and because they compared the peak of his career and Curry becoming a big star where Abdul-Rauf didn't. But as far as the stylistically, he was a very similar player. I think he would thrive. I know he would thrive.
Yeah, he definitely averaged more points today. I mean, he was beating up people in the big three at past 50 years old, right? Like, He still has the skills. He can still put up points right now. No, he was an excellent athlete. People don't talk about that. They only talk about his three-point shooting, but he could definitely throw it down. Super crafty. The dribbling rules were not as lenient when he first entered the league and in the early 90s, but he still had that ball on a string, super quick release. Yeah, he would be a superstar today. My next pick, Andrew, is Troy Murphy, and I'm going to direct you to an all-around NBA, that's the channel, video where it's Troy Murphy, 18 points at Miami Heat, 05-06, and 18 points doesn't sound like a lot, but I want people to see the all-around skill set that Troy Murphy displays at 6'11" in this video. Very versatile. You got step back jump shots, you got post moves, you got threes, etc. 6'11", 245, and a lefty. And that's important because lefty is unorthodox, right? And he was a lefty that could shoot the ball. He peaked at 15.4 points per game, 0-time All-Star, 38.8% from three for his career on 2.2 attempts per game at 6'11". In 08-09, he shot 45% from three on 4.9 attempts per game in 73 games, Andrew. 45% on about 5 attempts per game. He averaged 11.8 rebounds per game that same season, and he was reliable from the foul line. You're telling me 6'11", could get up and down the floor, could rebound the ball, could stretch the floor. You're telling me that Troy Murphy wouldn't be better in today's NBA? I just don't see how it's not possible.
I mean, look at what players like Al Horford are now allowed to do, be able to take more threes and get those open shots and those corner threes. Players like Troy Murphy would get the green light to take more threes, and they did have that shooting touch. So, no, I absolutely agree. Former Celtic Troy Murphy, of course.
Exactly. I mean, it wasn't a memorable stint with the Celtics, but it was nice to see him in green for a short time.
Now, I did cheat a little here with these players. I did mention a couple of players who have one All-Star appearance each, and I restricted it to that because that was kind of the peak of their career. Most of it was spent as more of a role player. And the first that comes to mind, Dale Ellis, Derek. At one point, had hit more threes than anyone else in NBA history, was overtaken and has since been surpassed as players are allowed to take more threes. He'd be able to take even more today and valued as a second or even a first option. Dale Ellis could really shoot.
6'7" shooting guard too, Andrew.
6'7"
at that shooting guard position. That is big in today's NBA as well. And, he averaged about 27 points per game at his peak. when he did play in the NBA. And I agree. I think his average could go up even higher. And I think he'd be shooting even more threes. And I think he'd even get better looks. And I think he would shoot an even higher percentage if that's possible. So definitely agree about Dale Ellis. My next pick is Mike Uzzolino. And I want you to look up the Mike Uzzolino mix on YouTube by Big Patries 15. And he only played 2 years in the NBA, 91, 92, and 92, 93. Just an awesome talent. Great with both hands, incredibly quick release, and often hit shots heavily contested. He shot 40.4% from three in those 2 seasons in 122 games on 2.3 attempts per game. In his rookie year, he shot 2.6 threes per game and shot 43.4%. He could dish the rock as well. Per 36 minutes, he averaged 6.2 assists per game. Listed at 5'10", so a little small, but we have players that height in today's NBA. But he was just so good at creating separation with his dribble. Once again, ball on a string, could get his shot off whenever he wanted. He has some sweet finishes in that video. I think that he would be, in the NBA longer and be even better today.
NBA Jam legend, Uzzolino, obviously, from the Mavericks and the original NBA Jam arcade release. And I did look up that mix when you mentioned it before, and you're absolutely right. I think that's a great pick there.
So who's next for you?
So this is my second one-time All-Star and kind of a cheat, but at the same time did become a role player for most of his career, and that is Derek Coleman. Derek. He had three-point range, we know this. He'd be, again, encouraged to take more nowadays, as well as put the ball on the floor. He could finish inside. That ability would be even better today with that lack of physicality once again. That all-around game that he had, I can see him, again, if he had that drive, and that was a problem with Derek Coleman, obviously, that is well documented, as you know. If he had that drive to be the best and to be that superstar that he had the skills to be, even back then, injuries took their toll as well. But if he was encouraged to be that playmaker that he could be with his ball handling abilities, to shoot a bit more from outside, to put the ball on the floor like he could, Derek Coleman, he could have been a fantastic player, an even better player than he was back in the day. But I think that versatility would really be welcomed today.
One of the biggest knocks on Derek Coleman as a young player, and actually throughout his career, was his shot selection, right? In today, that shot selection would be praised. If it was Eton Moore who talked about it, he said that when he first came into the league, and this wasn't even in the 90s, right? This wasn't even in the 90s, 80s, or early 2000s or anything. This is in the 2010s. Eton Moore said that when he first came into the league, he would be basically yelled at or, told to stop doing it if he was shooting contested shots. But the further along he got in his career, the coaches started changing their mindset, and they were praising him and telling him to take these tougher shots, these contested shots, these contested threes and whatnot. And you might be able to find that article if you look up like Eton Moore interview or something like that in Google. You should be able to find that. But Derek Coleman would probably be praised for a lot of the shots that he took back then, where he was definitely told that they were not good shots. So my next choice actually is another oddball one. I chose David Wood. He was 6'9" forward, so great size. Bounced around the league from 88 to 96. He could stretch the floor. A career 33.8% from three, which is just below league average, I believe, today. Had trouble staying on the floor during his NBA career. Teams rarely kept him around, but he could hoop. Watch my tape of him on X. Just put in at D4384 David Wood, and I have a highlight video of him. His career average was only 3.9, but he would be considered a big forward today, and his skill set translates incredibly nicely to today's NBA. Definitely could knock down the three at that 6'9" height. He has some really nice drives and jams. He could move his feet specifically on offense, so he had really good footwork, and I just don't see him being a fringe NBA player today. I feel like he would be a regular. I'm not saying he would be a star today. I'm not saying he would be an all-star today, but I definitely think he would find his way into a regular rotation and maybe average around 10, 12 points a game.
And that's a great point, is that we have looked at a lot of players who we feel would dominate, be even bigger stars. But to your point, players who were on the fringe back in the day, on just at the end of the bench, training camp cuts and on 10-day contracts and never really sticking around and being able to latch on with the team, with those skills and the way the game is approached these days, oh, absolutely, they could stick around in the modern NBA. And that highlight reel is very entertaining. It makes him look like a superstar, quite frankly.
People talk about people like David Wood like they're scrubs, right? And my point on that video too was, imagine there's a 6'9" guy that shows up to pick up that has those skills that David Wood has. Imagine you're standing in front of David Wood trying to guard him, and he blows by you and throws down a loud two-handed jam. Would you still call him a scrub? Would you still say that he sucked? Like, these are NBA players, and he was an unbelievable basketball talent. And sure, he only averaged 3.9 points per game for his NBA career, but he would make you look absolutely stupid. That's why I hate the disrespect and the ignorance around that, and kind of treating NBA players kind of like, I don't know, like pawns, right? Like subhuman. Sure. It's like David Wood would kick your butt and make you look absolutely stupid. And if he showed up to your pickup game, you would think that he was the best player you've ever seen and think that, why doesn't this guy dominate in the NBA, right?
Well, it's like that Brian Scalabrine quote. He's a lot closer to LeBron than the average person who plays pickup basketball is to him. And that's what we forget, that at some point these players were among the best at that level. It's just you get to the top level, the NBA, and suddenly the competition is much stiffer, and the gap between the top player and the bottom player is much larger, but they are still professional athletes, professional basketball players at the end of the day.
And yeah, I forgot. I got to push you to a David Wood video. So there's David Wood highlight video by YouTube channel Nice Victory. So look that one up, and you'll see about 5 minutes of David Wood highlights.
I think I might have seen that one before, but it's probably worth checking out again. Next up for me is Sam Perkins. Again, this is a very obvious pick, with him already being a stretch big, but again, he's going to be able to shoot more these days. The way the game is played these days, it is set up to open up looks for players like Sam Perkins. Again, I mentioned Al Horford. Imagine Sam Perkins in that role these days. He was a tremendous college player, obviously, and also he wouldn't be called upon to defend those traditional bigs and those strong players in the paint. And I'm not saying that Sam Perkins couldn't do that back in the day, but that's going to be a huge advantage for any big man that you bring from the 90s, the 80s, 90s into the modern game. You're not banging with those big bodies like you used to inside.
Well, you made this easy, Andrew, because my last choice was Sam Perkins, so we were thinking alike there. And the video I want to direct you to is Sam Perkins, Mavericks, 30 points, 12 for 15 field goals versus Nuggets, 1988. And it was posted by Kent Blazemore, and that's another good YouTube channel that shows a lot of great classic footage. But yeah, Sam Perkins, zero-time All-Star, career from 84 to 2001, shot 36.2% from three for his career, 6'9", 235 is his listing. Obviously, he's a little bit heavier than that later in his career. Moonlighted a little bit at small forward, but mostly a power forward and center. Peaked at 16.5 points per game in 91, 92 after Magic retired. Shot 40.8% from three at age 38 in 81 games in 99, 2000 on 2.7 attempts per game. Yeah, so young Sam Perkins with Dallas really could move his feet, and he could get up and contest shots and swat shots and had good hands, and I think he was an excellent athlete. And that's also why I want you to watch that 1988 video, because you can see him getting up and down the floor. I think he would have absolutely no issues today, quote unquote, keeping up. And I think that his versatility would shine even more because, like you said, he wouldn't have to bang as much, right? He would be able to put those skills that he had more on display out on the perimeter, in the mid-range, etc. And then on defense, he could, roam a little bit more. So yeah, I think Sam Perkins would be even better today.
Tar Heel, of course, champion alongside Michael Jordan on that 1982 Tar Heels squad. So that was your last role player. Before I throw mine out there, do you have any honorable mentions?
I do. Sasha Danilovic, or you may know him as Predrag Danilovic. And the video I'm going to direct you to is from YouTube channel Lamar Matic. And that's another great one that you should subscribe to.
I love all these. I'm subscribed to, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So YouTube, Predrag, quote, Sasha, unquote, Danilovic, 15 points versus Bulls, 1996 playoffs. Listed at 6'5", so good size for shooting guard, small forward. Played only in 95, 96, and 96, 97. Shot 37.9% from three on 4.2 attempts per game in 60 games. Physical guard who could just light you up. He was rugged. He was strong. He could go downhill, get to the hoop. Smart. player. And also a fun note, his daughter, Olga Danilovich, is actually a pro WTA tennis player. So I've seen her in matches recently and whatnot. So it's kind of cool. So they have athletes in the family as well. But I think Danilovich would just be absolutely better today, and I think he would have a longer NBA career.
Well, that kind of leads me into my last example, because I think these days the league has become more open to foreign-born players getting more time quicker. Obviously, there were trailblazers in that regard. Petrovic, Drazen Petrovic is obviously an early example of that in the 80s, and indeed was a trailblazer at one point, literally a trailblazer with Portland. But my last pick, and this is my oddball choice, and it's very much out of left field, Derek, but at the same time not surprising given my nationality, my accent. Andrew Gaze, the Aussie Michael Jordan, though stylistically he's more like Larry Bird in his game. A tremendous shooter, an all-around player. I think he would absolutely thrive in a game that encourages players to bomb away from three, to get open shots as they do today, and also if he was able to come into the league younger, and with that more open attitude to foreign-born players getting those NBA opportunities when they don't necessarily come through the college system. I just think that Gaze, if he came along at the right time with that skill set, could have had a longer and more successful NBA career. He was a great NBL player for us and great with the Boomers in the Olympics in international competition, but it's just a shame in some respects that he came along when he did, because the opportunities to really get time in the NBA weren't there.
I'm surprised you didn't say Shane Heal, the Hammer.
He's an honorable mention. He is
okay.
He is an honorable mention. I mean, obviously he was a great three-point shooter as well, but not as much of an all-around player as Gaze. I think he'd probably end up more like a Patty Mills, which is still great, but I think Gaze could have possibly been an all-star level player.
And I personally don't know enough about Andrew Gaze, so I'm going to have to watch some more footage.
I'll have to send you some, yeah.
Now you have me intrigued.
So that's my oddball choice. And of course, Shane Heal is that honourable mention, but again, I think he'd be more on that Patty Mills level. He did get that opportunity after that showing at the 96 Olympics, but the opportunities for foreign-born players, if they didn't come through the college system, wasn't quite as there. The trust wasn't there, obviously, coming from other professional leagues. Certainly more so Europe than Australia at the time, but we've seen more Aussies get a chance in the NBA since. So, Gaze is my pick.
Yeah, and I think Andrew would also take Shane Heal over Ben Simmons.
Easily.
And I wouldn't blame you. So let's get to the community responses, Andrew, and I believe we had a few.
Yeah, so let's tip things off with Relhouse on X, formerly known as Twitter, of course, says Charles Barkley, Reggie Miller, Michael Jordan, Nick Van Exel, and Allen Iverson. So some great stars that would be just as tremendous today, and if not more so, obviously. And some familiar names there. Reggie Miller, I think, is a very obvious pick for the three-point shooting.
Yeah, Reggie Miller was so good at coming off screens and getting a shot off. It's similar to Klay Thompson, but I think that Reggie Miller was a more versatile player overall than Klay Thompson. I think that he was better at putting the ball on the floor, overall getting to the rim. I think that he just overall could have been, he averaged 24 points per game at his peak in 89-90. I think he could average closer to 28, 29 points per game in today's NBA. In relation to Allen Iverson and Nick Van Exel, two guys who, had the ball on a string, who would go viral on social media pretty much every day today. Nick Van Exel was such a flashy player, and he had those quick pull-up threes and those no-look passes and those over-the-shoulder passes. People talk about Jason Williams kind of bringing Showtime to the NBA when he entered in the late 90s, but I'm sorry, Showtime was already there with guys like Nick Van Exel, right? Yeah. I mean, Jason Williams was an unbelievable player, super flashy player, very Pete Maravich-esque, but Nick Van Exel was already doing a lot of things that Jason Williams was doing, and he was doing it on good Lakers teams. So, I think Nick Van Exel and Allen Iverson would be better today.
Allen Iverson, the original NBA 2K cover player, of course, and he's also mentioned by Steven, the Live King, who says Allen Iverson, Vince Carter, Reggie Miller, Tim Hardaway, and Rashard Lewis. Rashard Lewis, another stretch big that would definitely thrive today. Iverson we've just covered. Vince Carter, I would absolutely agree that the skill set is there to be a superstar and put up even bigger numbers today, but with the less physical defense, Derek, I think some of his dunks, his dunks would still be spectacular because he was just that good at flying and doing fancy stuff with the ball. But a lot of Vince Carter's best highlights, his best dunks, came because players were trying to block him, and they couldn't.
Like his dunk on Alonzo Mourning when he was with the Nets. Yeah, I think, though, that you have seen many poster dunks from guys like Anthony Edwards, so I think you'd still see them from Vince Carter, and we definitely need those, right? About Rashard Lewis, so listed at 6'10", so great height, career three-point percentage of 38.6, well above league average for any season, 4.4 attempts per game for his career, and he peaked at 22.4 points per game. He was an all-star at one point. Not stellar rebound numbers, but averaged about 7 rebounds per game at his peak, and had some good steals numbers. But Rashard Lewis, a video game legend, absolutely. But yeah, how could you not think that a young prime Rashard Lewis wouldn't be better today with the freedom of movement and the amount of open looks that he would get and the open lanes and whatnot? So I agree with Rashard Lewis.
And at MPA_Spot says Steve Smith, Tracy McGrady, Allen Iverson, Peja Stojakovic, Rasheed Wallace, and Antoine Walker. That is 6, but we'll certainly take 6 because those are some fine examples.
Antoine Walker, out of all those names, would absolutely love playing in today's NBA more than anybody, because nobody liked the three-pointer better than Antoine Walker. And he killed me as a Celtics fan at the time because he would take so many bad threes. And some of them would go in. Some of them would go in off the glass from the center, which no player ever intends to do that. He even had a game winner, I want to say, versus the Wizards that went off the glass from 3. And even though it went in and I was excited about it, I'm like, damn. So Antoine Walker is going to be encouraged to take more of these and whatnot. But yeah, today where Antoine Walker would even have more space to shoot them and more freedom to shoot them, he would absolutely love playing in today's NBA.
I asked you about Billups last week, obviously, and you kind of answered my question there. But Walker, for you, was he kind of one of those players that you did enjoy, you did like, because he would do some cool things and he could knock down those big shots, but at the same time would frustrate you? Like from minute to minute, you could love him and hate him.
Yeah, he was a love to hate and hate to love, depending on the game, to be completely honest with you. He worked so hard on the offensive boards and on rebounds in general that you always felt like he was fighting for you. And I think that's why it was still easy to root for him at times, is because, yeah, he would make some bonehead plays and take some bonehead shots. But when it really came down to it, he was really trying to get the W and he would work really hard. So I'd be honest with you, my favorite thing about Antoine Walker was his work on the boards, how he would box out and how he would fight.
Employee number 8, and very briefly, for 2 games there, when he returned in 2005, employee number 88, one of the few players in league history to wear that odd number. Next up we have Thundershack, says, with positionless basketball where everyone switches, imagine some of these guys in small ball lineups now. Sean Marion, Andrei Kirilenko, Ron Artest, Lamar Odom, and Garnett is perfect now and any era. Honorable mention to Antoine Walker, who, to your point, took modern era three-point attempts 20 years early.
Yeah, so I want to focus on Sean Marion, AK-47, and Lamar Odom, just guys with some great size. 6'7" Sean Marion with those wide shoulders. He was a 4-time All-Star, but he could stretch the floor and hit the three. Outstanding rebounder, and not from a position standpoint. He was mostly a leaping rebounder, which there's a difference. There's the guys that will jump for rebounds as opposed to getting position, like Antoine Walker did. So Marion was one of those guys that would go over your back and just rip the ball from over your head and run the other way. Or he'd come flying in for a tip slam, etc. He averaged 11.8 rebounds a game at his peak in his best season. And, could score the ball, could do everything. On the break in today's NBA, he would just absolutely be a menace. AK-47, great size, almost 6'10", great shot blocker. He led the league one season with 3.3 per game. I think he would average even more points today because he could stretch the floor and hit the three. Not a great shooter, but I think he would shoot a better percentage today. And he was everywhere. And I think his versatility would be incredibly valued now. And then Lamar Odom was 6'10", another guy with just great size that could play the small forward position. One of the Denver Nuggets' biggest strengths was having a guy like Michael Porter Jr., who's 6'10", playing that small forward position, right? And then if you go back and you look at the Sonics in the 90s, one of their biggest strengths was that size where they could slot Detlef Schrempf in there at the small forward position, and he was like 6'11", right? So size at that small forward position has always been coveted, and it is again today. But Lamar Odom could do absolutely everything. Another guy who, could flat out rebound the ball, great passer, was efficient from the field, et cetera. So yeah, Lamar Odom definitely, I think, could be better today.
Agreed on all counts. And just to throw it out there before we head over to Facebook for a few more responses, these 7 seconds or less Suns, they didn't last very long. I remember them lasting a lot longer than they did, but Marion was out by 2008. He traded for Shaq that year, only a few years together, and Amari missed most of the 2006 season with that knee injury after surgery. So you think of them as lasting a really long time, but it was a very short time in Phoenix Suns history. Obviously, Nash was there for years as well, but that particular group was together for a very short time.
What makes me laugh, though, about the 7 seconds or less Suns is when people talk about Mike D'Antoni like he reinvented the game or came up with something new. Listen, people.
Don Nelson?
There were so many teams in the 80s that were playing at that pace.
Yeah.
And not just at that pace, faster, moving the ball faster, getting the ball up the court faster, finishing, in 5 seconds as opposed to 7 seconds. The Denver Nuggets, the Lakers, I can go down the list of so many teams in the 80s that were doing that, but they like to act like that was a new thing, right? It wasn't. And Mike D'Antoni definitely didn't create like fast-paced offense. The 80s, it was all over the place. So, yeah, spare me with that.
And jumping over to Facebook now, Royce says, Sir Charles definitely, His Highness, Shaq, the Admiral, Kareem or Wilt, because there is no center doing now what they did then. Dan Marley would be amazing today with the defense and shooting from all over on the land of plenty, as it used to be called. Dominic Wilkins would be even more must-see now. Also gives a shout-out to Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Steve Nash, Jason Williams, Allen Iverson, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, almost all of the 90s NBA's All-Stars, Richmond, Mourning, Hardaway, Mullen, Kevin Johnson, Mark Price, KG, Ray Allen, Kobe would be even bigger now, Dirk, Timmy D, Larry Johnson, and way more who I can't fit in here. And also love the highlight reel that you shared, and I downloaded and shared on Facebook as well. Names that jump out at me there, obviously, Derek, Mark Price, such a pure shooter. Chris Mullen is another player that was that I considered as well. And Dan Marley, again, a great athlete and a great shooter who just lighted up. You lit me up with him in NBA Live 95 from beyond half court in the game we played a head-to-head over Parsec. But yeah, I mean, those names are very nostalgic to me, obviously, but those are the ones that jump out to me, those great shooters who would get the green light today, even more so.
Yeah, not only that, those players were also good with their feet, right? I think that, in today's NBA where they're basically switching everything, which I think is just an absolutely stupid strategy, and it creates so many mismatches. And how many times do I need to see Jokic matched up with like a point guard or a shooting guard because the opposing team is just switching without even trying to fight through the pick? I don't even want to get into that conversation because it's just going to piss me off, Andrew. But the point is that the people that he named also had quick feet. And, even in today's NBA where they are switching everything, I think that those players would be able to stay with their assignment, or if they had to switch, stay with that person who now has the ball. So, Dan Marley was a great athlete. He was a great defender. He was Jordan's primary defender for a reason. Just like people like to crap on Craig Elo, right? Because Jordan made a shot on him or whatever. And because maybe some people think Craig Elo is goofy or not, or whatnot, but Craig Elo was one hell of an athlete. And Steve Kerr had an interview about this, and he talked about how great of an athlete Craig Elo was. And you can watch some footage of him getting chased down blocks and throwing it down and, blocking people's outside shots and everything. He's a great athlete. But people like to form the narrative that players like Craig Elo and Dan Marley weren't great athletes, but I'm not buying it, and it doesn't match up to the footage that I see. Another point too is the good names that you mentioned. Those guys were great shooters back then, and they weren't shooting as many threes as they shoot today. Now imagine the landing space foul rule, right? Where now they don't have to worry about super hard contests because somebody's worried about getting under their feet and getting a foul. So now they have more blue sky, right? They also have more green light than they did back then, way more green light in order to shoot more threes. So, yeah, I think all of those guys could have increased averages.
And to that point, if you're going to crap on players for not shutting down the best players of all time and limiting tremendous scorers each and every game, then 99.9% of the players who ever played in the NBA are apparently terrible basketball players, and that is just absurd.
Yeah, how dare you not stop young, primed Michael Jordan? I mean, the Wizards' Michael Jordan absolutely torched Richard Jefferson, Kerry Kittles, Jason Kidd, and Kenyon Martin. But we don't want to talk about that, right? Like a way less athletic Michael Jordan was torching them. But because Craig Elo fits your narrative, you're going to bring him up and try to discredit Jordan's competition. Like, don't be stupid.
And jumping over to the NLSC Discord now, we have a great community going with the Discord, Derek. Obviously, we've had the forum running for years, but the Discord is picking up steam. Love to see new people jumping in all the time and chatting with each other. Vin says Tony Kukoc, Keith Van Horn, Rasheed Wallace, Steve Smith, and Kenny Anderson. Kukoc, obviously, I enjoy as a Bulls fan. Keith Van Horn is a player we've mentioned before. Very underrated, very short career. You look at his numbers, though. Could shoot the ball. He could put the ball on the floor. Tremendous talent. Overshadowed, obviously, by other players from the 97 draft. Billups, eventually. Tim Duncan, obviously. Tracy McGrady as well, to name just a few. But certainly a great player and seemingly part of the Nets' future at one point. And Steve Smith is a player that's come up on a couple of lists as well. Three-point gunner of the 90s. Kenny Anderson, highly recruited player coming out of high school. You imagine the hype he'd get these days with the internet. You look at the hype that LeBron got 21 years ago. That was Kenny Anderson in the late 80s.
So I'll start with Tony Kukoc. So another guy with great size, 6'10", and could slot in at the small forward or power forward, averaged 18 a game roughly, at his peak. And yeah, he could stretch the floor, 33.5% from three and 2.6 attempts for his career, but that wasn't his biggest strength, right? It was his all-around play. It was his versatility. It was his rebounds and assists, and he could get his hands in there in the passing lanes and had good hands in general for steals. So yeah, Kukoc has the potential of being better today as well. I want to point out, with guys like Steve Smith, just the advantage of being 6'8" at shooting guard. Like, remember I mentioned Dale Ellis being 6'7" as an advantage. 6'8" is big for that shooting guard position in any era, and it creates so many mismatches and so many opportunities for that player. So yeah, I think Steve Smith would be a really big guard in today's NBA, and he'd have the freedom to shoot more threes. And I think that his average would probably go up as well.
I mean, at 6'8", look at some of the players that are being slotted in at power forward these days. He had the size, he had the ability, he wasn't a weak player, and the way they play, those players are stretch bigs, even though they aren't huge players. You think of stretch bigs as 6'9" or taller usually, but there's a lot of players who were bigger than their position back then who could probably play an extra couple of positions these days, Derek. And I believe that Steve Smith did play a little bit of point guard early on for the Heat.
He did, actually. He could handle the ball, and he had good floor vision. And I also want to say 6'8", I believe, is the same height as Paul George.
And Juicy Shackmeat says Mitch Richmond, Bill Laimbeer, Mehmet Okur, Chris Webber, and Magic Johnson. Richmond, again, like a Glenn Rice, who I didn't see mentioned, those players from the 90s who were the three-point threats in that era, I think would certainly thrive, obviously, and Okur being that stretch big. Chris Webber was also on my shortlist for a while there, Derek, as a superstar who would be even better. A big man who could handle the ball, be a playmaker, he could shoot, and of course, he could finish inside, which would be even easier today.
Yeah, Chris Webber would be possibly even better in today's NBA for the same reasons that KG would, right? Super versatile power forwards. They could dish the rock. They could hit the mid-range shot. Webber could even step out and hit threes at different points in his career, and both were just great around the basket, smart players. I also think somebody else mentioned, I also think Dirk would be even way better. He was a legend and a Hall of Fame talent and just ridiculous when he played. I think he would be even better today. Mehmet Okur, though, 6'11", great three-point percentage for his career, 37.5% on 2.5 attempts per game, averaged 9.1 rebounds per game at his peak, and averaged 18 points per game at his peak as well. But yeah, I think Mehmet would thrive in today's NBA, so I definitely agree with that one. And he also mentioned Laimbeer, which I think is a super underrated choice, and people think of Laimbeer as this guy that was on the Bad Boys Pistons that was super physical, but they never talk about his skill set. So another guy who was 6'11", listed at 245. But a lot of people don't know this, but he led the league in rebounds in 85-86, Andrew, at 13.1 a game. And he had a string of 7 seasons in a row of averaging over 10 rebounds per game. He averaged 17.5 points per game at his peak. He could block shots, one season averaging 1.4, and he was also efficient from the field as well. As a three-point shooter, he shot 32.6% on only 0.6 attempts per game. But yeah, he was one of the original big men three-point shooters, but he gave you a lot more than that, and he was a better athlete than people give him credit for.
And for Dirk, I'll also bring up again that when he came into the league, a lot of foreign-born players really had to prove themselves before they got playing time compared to other rookies. Played just 20 minutes per game in that first season, the lockout abbreviated 99 season. 47 games, 24 started, 20 minutes per game. Wasn't getting the opportunities. Not a great Dallas team yet. Obviously, some sloppy play coming out of that lockout. But if he had those opportunities a little bit sooner, he was playing 36 minutes per game in his second season, did emerge. But if he did have more opportunities earlier on, if he'd stayed a little bit healthier, if he'd not taken a smaller role later on in his career, if he had kind of remained that star in Dallas and that first option, he's already up there with over 30,000 points, Derek. He could be close to surpassing Kareem himself if he'd had those opportunities.
Agreed. And another player, too, that, I talked about it when we were talking about Bill Walton, another player who also stepped it up in the playoffs. And I think that that's a little disappointing when it comes to basketball stat discussion. I don't think playoff numbers are discussed enough. If you notice that most of the conversation is centered around regular season numbers, but the playoffs is when, the lights are the brightest and
Absolutely.
Where all the chips are on the table. And I love when people actually bring up playoff performances like I did with Jordan's three-point shooting earlier in this podcast. So yeah, keep an eye on those regular season numbers, but also pay really close attention to what these players did in the playoffs.
Dirk actually led all scorers with 26.6 points per game in the 2004 playoffs. To that point, he did only play 5 games in that postseason in the first round there, and the pace had really slowed in the 2004 seasons, and that kind of underscores it. But a consistent 20-plus points per game scorer in the playoffs in 2011 during that Mavericks title run, 27.7 points per game. He really did step it up in the postseason. He had some tremendous performances in the finals that year, but also in the playoffs leading up to those finals. Dirk, a tremendous player.
Absolutely dismantled the Lakers, ridiculous shooting, and then he made one of the best defenders in the league at the time, Serge Ibaka, look ridiculous, just constantly fading over him, shooting over him, getting a first step on him when they played against the Thunder, and then obviously capping it off with a great finals against the Heat. Yeah, Dirk in that 2011 playoff run just seemed to be invincible.
So thank you to everybody who responded to Derek's prompt. As always fun to have these discussions about real basketball as well, Derek. And there are so many players that you wish had more of an opportunity. Maybe they'd have more of an opportunity today. It certainly seems that way with some of the rule changes and the changes to the style of the game. And it's so nostalgic to bring up these names, obviously, and I always love doing that. And I really have to commend you for your deep cuts this week. Really enjoyed them.
I'll give you another deep cut. I'll tell you, we should do a whole podcast on players that would be no better in today's NBA that would fizzle out like they did when they played. This guy's going to be catching a stray, but like guys like Orion Green, who played with the Celtics sparingly. I've never seen, I don't think in my life, a player that was less effective. I mean, we slotted this guy in at point guard, and it was just an absolute nightmare. He didn't create for anybody. He wasn't aggressive on offense. He couldn't put the ball in the hole. I mean, obviously, he's a great basketball player because he was able to make the NBA. But Orion Green, I don't think there is an era that he could play in that he would, get significant time. And, other guys like Fab Melo. Fab Melo was another guy who played a few games with the Celtics. I don't think there's an era that you put Fab Melo in the NBA where Fab Melo would be a good NBA player. So obviously, it's not crapping on those guys because they're legendary basketball players in their communities and all of that stuff. And Fab Melo obviously did pass away, sadly. But, they were not effective players in the NBA, and I don't think they ever would be.
Certainly do remember those names from making rosters over the years. I was afraid you were going to disrespect the late great Yinkadare. Glad that you didn't.
No, because we always need great passing big men in any era, Andrew.
That we do. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week and every week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.